Begin today in the Gemara on Daf Zayin Amud Beis, where it says Hasheichet Chaye V'Oif B'Yom Tivchulu. So this was the halach in the Mishnah, where there was a machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, whether you can shecht on Yontif and do the mitzvah of Kisi Adam. So Beis Shammai says that you can shecht on Yontif and you can dig and cover it. And Beis Hillel says Lo Yishchait unless you have the earth prepared from before. So the Gemara now wants to understand, first of all, what exactly is the case of the machlokes here? How do we explain this? Hasheichet. The fact that the Mishnah uses the term hasheichet, the one that shechted, that's usually the way you translate it, which means di'evedin, only once it's done, if he already shechted, then Beis Shammai is saying that he could cover it, he can do the Kisi Adam. But l'chatchila loy, even according to Beis Shammai, l'chatchila, he should not go ahead and shecht and do the Kisi Adam. But look into the words that Beis Hillel says. Beis Hillel and Beis Hillel say, Lo yishchait. Do not go ahead and shecht. In other words, Beis Hillel is speaking about a person that did not shecht yet, and he's telling you, L'chatchila, do not go ahead and shecht. Meklal. So from that it seems the Tanakama Savar, that the Beis Shammai, the Tanakama, he holds yishchait, that you could L'chatchila go ahead and shecht. So that's the Gemara's question here. Is the argument in the case of L'chatchila, or is the argument in the case of B'di'evet? So the Gemara says, Holei Kashya. This contradiction in the terminology, it's not a question. Because when Beis Hillel said Lo Yishchait, what he meant is Lo Yishchait v'yachase. He was responding to Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai said that B'di'evet, once he shechted, he could cover the blood. So Beis Hillel is responding, Lo Yishchait v'yachase. Once you shechted, do not go ahead and do the Kisi Adam. So in this language, we could still say that they're arguing only about B'di'evet. But l'chatchila, everybody would agree that you do not do the shchita. Ka'ama, that's what Beis Hillel was saying. But now, what is the next thing that it says here in the Mishnah? So here it clearly says, Umaydim, Beis Hillel agrees, She'im shachad B'di'evet, once you shechted, She'yachber b'deker, you dig with a shovel, V'yachase, and you cover the blood. So clearly, Beis Hillel is Maide B'di'evet. So from this you see the Reisha lav di'evedu. In the Reisha, where they're arguing, it's not b'di'evet. It's an argument l'chatchila whether you can go ahead and shecht or not. So Rabbi says that's right. They're arguing about l'chatchila. And hachi ka'ama. This is what Beis Shammai was saying. Hasheichet shabali malach. A person that wants to shecht, he's coming and asking us a question. What should I do? Keitzad. What should I do? So it's l'chatchila. So Keitzad Oimaloi, that is. You read it together. Keitzad Oimaloi, what do we tell him? Beis Shammai Yoimrim. So Beis Shammai says, Oimrim, we tell him, Shchait. First thing is you shecht, then chafer, then you dig for the sand, and then the kisa, and then cover the blood. Beis Hillel Oimrim. Beis Hillel say, Lo yishchait elam kein hayolei afa mucha mebeid yaim. You're not allowed to l'chatchila go ahead and shecht unless you have the sand prepared from before Yontif. So that's the machlokes. They're arguing l'chatchila whether you can go ahead and shecht or not. Rav Yosef agrees as well that they're arguing about l'chatchila to go ahead and shecht, but the order of exactly how he does it is slightly different. Hachi ka'amar, this is the halacha here. The hasheichet shabali malech keitzadai maloi, a person that wants to shecht and he's asking us what to do. So what do we tell him? So Beis Shammai say, we tell him in the following order. First, lei chafer. First, go and dig for the sand, and only afterwards shachai, then you shecht, and then vikisa, and then you'll cover the blood. Beis Hillel say lo yishchait, you don't shecht elam ken hayolei afa mucha mebeid yaim, unless you have the earth, the sand prepared from before Yontif. So the only difference between Rabbi and Rav Yosef was regarding the order, whether it's first shchita or first digging for the sand. So the Gemara now wants to explain that machlokes. So Amalei Abai Rav Yosef, Abai says to Rav Yosef, Lema, should we say that Mar, the master, Rav Yosef, V'Rabbe, B'Rab Zeira Marav Kamafligisu. As far as the order here, they're arguing what Rab Zeira said in the name of Rav. Rab Zeira Marav, Asheichet, when you come to shecht, Tzarech Sheyitein, Offer Lamata, V'Offer Lamaila. It's not enough to cover the blood from the top, you have to put earth from below, and also earth from above, and cover it completely that way. Shenema, as the pasuk says, v'shafach es damai, when you spill the blood when you shecht, v'chisau bi'ofar. So it says in the pasuk the term bi'ofar. Ofar leinema doesn't say cover it with earth. Ela bi'ofar. Bi'ofar means that it's already inside the offer, because it already has offer from below, and you add on the top. Melamed, so that teaches me, Sha'ashoichet, tzarech she'itin ofel lamata v'ofel lamayla. You put some earth below and earth on the top to cover the blood. So now it seems like that's the machlokes here, whether you have to dig for the earth before shchita and prepare the earth from below or not. The Mar Isli de Rav Zera. Rav Yosef says that first you dig for the earth, holds like Rav Zera that you have to prepare the earth from below. V'Rabbe less like the Rav Zera. And Rabbe that says that you dig for the earth after the shchita and you cover it only on the top disagrees with what Rav Zera said. Amalei, so Rav Yosef answers him, no, that's not the basis of our machlokes. Bein lididi, bein leRabbe, Islan de Rav Zera. Both myself and Rabbe, we agree to Rav Zera that the way to do the Kisi Adam is to put earth on the bottom and earth on the top. And here our argument is as follows. Rabbe's Sovar, Rabbe's opinion is, if you have already earth prepared for below, so then you should go ahead and shecht. But if you don't have that earth prepared from below, then you should not go ahead and shecht. You cannot go and dig for the earth after the shechita. You have to have it from before. And if you don't have it prepared from before, you shouldn't go ahead and shecht. Why not? Because you have to prepare the earth from before, you're going to dig that earth to prepare it, and then you may change your mind and not shecht. And it comes out that you did something that's asa and yantiv, not for the purpose of the shechita. That's what the Rabbi was saying. According to my opinion, which is Rav Yosef, Ha adife. This, the fact that he's shechting for yontif, that's more important. If you're not going to allow him to prepare the offer first on the bottom and then the offer on the top, so then you're going to prevent him of having the simcha of yontif, being able to shecht and have his food to eat. So even though there is this concern that he might dig for the earth and then he might not end up shechting, but on the other hand, by not allowing him to shecht, you're stopping him from simchas yontif, and therefore that's more important. Then it said in the Mishnah, Umaydim Shem Shachat Sheyachbe Bedeke V'Yechase. That B'diyeved Beis Hillel agrees that once he shechted, he could dig and cover the blood. So Amar Rav Zrika, Amar Rav Yehuda, V'hu Sheyesh Le Deker Noatz Me'Bayid Yom. It's not only if he has B'diyeved that it said, you can go and dig. The deker, the shovel, has to already be stuck into the ground from before Yontif. And therefore, Sarashi explains, what Rav Yehuda was trying to say is that we don't want him to be over on any Yisr. So only if it's stuck into the ground, then he's not going to be over on any Yisr. And Rashi here explains, based on what we're going to see soon in the Gemara, that the question over here is whether a lois essa gets pushed off by an essa. Because over here we have an essa, the kisah ba'afar, the mitzvah of kisidam. And that's going to push off the lois essa of lois asa kol malacha. So basically what Rav Yehuda is saying is that according to Beis Hillel, the essa does not push off this lois essa, and therefore only if you have the shovel already in the ground before Yontif, then he's going to be able to shecht and cover the blood. Fragt the Gemara, how does it help if he has the shovel in the ground? But v'haka'avid ketisha. But then you have to go and shovel out the earth, and you're crumbling it. Your ketisha is a toilda of teichen, where you grind. So how could you do this on Yontif if you're saying that the essa is not teichen the leisas of the essa of Yontif? So we have to add to that another detail. We're talking about soft earth. So once your shovel is stuck into the ground, you have a soft earth, and you're not being over any essa. But there's another issue. Guma. You're creating a hole in the ground. And when you create a hole, that's a toilda of chayrish. Or baina, Rashi says. Rashi says, v'chayev mishum binyan. So you're digging this hole, this space in the ground. So how could you make this guma? So the Gemara answers, according to Rab Abba, that said there is no baina here. Why? D'amar Rab Abba, ha'chayfer guma b'Shabbos. Someone that digs a hole on Shabbos, and he doesn't dig it because he's trying to make that hole, but he only needs the earth of it. Potter ala. For that he's potter on Shabbos. So there's two pshatim why he's potter. Rashi says he's potter because it's a makalkel, and kol makalkel in peturin, any malacha that you're just ruining something is potter. And Taisva says this is called a malacha she'ein tzricha legufa. You're doing the malacha, but you don't need the malacha itself. It's not the way it was done in the Mishkan. You don't need that hole there, and therefore you're going to be potter. So Taisus points out, even though usually these are things that lechatchila you shouldn't do, malacha she'ein tzricha legufa for sure, lechatchila is aser. But over here, because of Simchas Yontif, they will matter it. But they will only matter if the shovel is ready, prepared in the ground. Going to the next part of the Mishnah concludes, She'efe kira the ashes of an oven, muchanu, that's prepared. That could be used. So the Gemara wants to understand, first of all, the flow of what the Mishnah is saying. Whoever mentioned, who was speaking about the ashes of an oven, that the Mishnah says, that this ashes is prepared. And for the Gemara, so Rabbi says, this is what the Mishnah is saying. It's really saying another point, according to Beis Hillel. Besides what he said before, that once you shechted b'diavad, and as the Gemara just explained, you have to have the shovel in the ground, and it has to all be soft. So another point he said, if you have ashes of the oven, that's prepared, and according to everybody, that could be used for the Kisi Adam. Separate point. Taisus here points out that it's not so pashut that ashes could be used for Kisi Adam. The mitzvah of Kisi Adam is usually with afar, with sand, not with ashes. And he actually brings from a Mishnah in Chulin where Beis Shammai says you cannot use ashes. So why does it say over here you can use ashes? So Taisus says there's different types of ashes. There are ashes that come from wood, ashes that comes from other materials, different taifanim. Okay. So the Gemara continues, Amarav Yuda, Amarav, Loishanu, El Shahusak, Me'erev Yomtiv. This that it says you can use the ashes is only if the oven was already burned from before Yomtiv and you have the ashes already prepared from before. Aval Husak be Yomtiv. But if you took firewood and you burnt it on Yomtiv itself and now you have ashes, so then asr. You can't use this ashes for the Kisi Dam. This ashes is noilad. It just came into being and therefore it's muktzah. However, if these ashes that was just produced now is still hot enough that you can still use it to fry an egg on it or to roast an egg on it, so then mutter. So then you would be allowed to use it even though it was produced on Yantif, because it's not muktzah for using it for the egg. It's still hot for that purpose, so you're allowed to use it also to take it to cover the blood. This is what we learned in the Beitza. When it was said that the ashes of the oven is prepared for this, that's only if it was already burnt and prepared from before Yomtiv. But if it was burnt on Yomtiv itself, then asr. Then it's muktzah, it's noilad. But if it's still hot enough that you can roast an egg on it, so you can use it for that, so it's mutter also to use for the shchita to cover the blood. Another halacha regarding the earth that you want to use for Kisi Adam, hichnis afar leginase. A person brought in a big pile of earth into his garden. He wants to use it for the garden. Or the churvasa, or he had an area of a ruined area that he wants to use the earth there. But so he brought a big pile in, and it's still there in a pile. Mutter lachases by, he's allowed to use it to cover the blood with it. And the point the Gemara is saying is that since he put it there in a pile and he didn't use it yet, it's not considered to be muktzah because as long as it's there in one big pile, he plans on using it for all kinds of things. And therefore he had in mind also to use it for Kisi Dam, so it's not considered muktzah. Amar Rav Yehuda, a similar halacha, Rav Yehuda said, Machnes Adam Meloi Kupasa Yafar. Person can bring in a basket full of earth into his house, and then Vaisaboy called Sarkai, and he spills it out on the floor, but he can use it for wherever he wants, even for Kisi Dam. So Rashi explains the chiddush here is, even though it's much less, it's a small pile, it's just a basket full, and he pours it out on the ground, so you might think it became already bottled to the ground and now it's muktzeh, but because it's in one ground, in one area, as the Gemara will explain now, so therefore you can use it. So Darash Mazutra Mishmeid Mazutra Rabba, said in the name of Mazutra Rabba, it's only if you pour it out in one specific corner and it wasn't spread out all over the ground, so then it's designated for use and it's not muktzah. Meisvei, so the Gemara asks on this. So the point we saw over here is if you have earth prepared, and we had a few different scenarios here, whether it's the afer of the kira, whether it's the offer and the gina, or the basketful that you brought into your house, so then you have available, you can use it for the Kisi Dam, you can shecht. So the Gemara asks on this, it says in the Beitza, koi. A koi is a species that there's a suffix if it's a behema or it's a chaya. The halach of Kisi Adam is only regarding a chaya, not regarding a behema. So regarding the koi, the Beitza says, Ein sheichten oisa b'yomtiv. You don't shecht the koi on a yomtiv because you don't know if you're going to have to do Kisi Adam or not. And then if you're going to shecht, you're not going to be able to do the Kisi Adam because there might be a behema. But because it's a suffix, you should be doing it, so therefore don't shecht it on yomtiv. Vim shachtai b'diavad, once you shechted the koi on yomtiv, so then aim lechasen is damai. You shouldn't cover its blood because maybe it's a behema. So how could you go and cover its blood? Fragt the Gemara, so what is this Beitza talking about? If what we said before is true, that there could be many scenarios where he has the earth prepared and there's no muktzeh, or he has it prepared to cover it, so then why does it say that b'di'evet, if he shechted it, he shouldn't cover the blood? L'chasyeh. Let him cover the blood, Kid Rav Yehuda, like Rav Yehuda just said, that he brought a basket full of earth into his house. So the Gemara says, based on your question, you're assuming that this Beitza is speaking about a case that he has earth available to cover it. So according to your question, so you don't have to say what like Rav Yehuda. Just say l'chasye be'efekira. Why doesn't he use the ashes from the oven? Oy bedeken nor. So like we mentioned before, if you have already the shovel stuck into the ground and it's soft earth, so you can use that. Elo. So what's the pshat here in the Beitza when it says regarding the koi that if you shechter it, the b'di'evet, you shouldn't do kisi adam? The lastly, the case there is he doesn't have any of the offer prepared. So therefore, since it's a suffix that it might be a behemoth, it's not even necessarily chayiv and kisi adam. So therefore, you can't go and dig to be able to do the kisi adam. So achanami the lastly. So over here as well, your question, you're asking on Rav Yehuda that why doesn't he have a basket of earth? The answer is he doesn't have it. That's why he can't do it. Frag the Gemara, wait a minute, if that's the case that he doesn't have, so Eihachi, my area suffix. Why is this Beitza saying this halacha, that b'di'evet, if you shechted, that you shouldn't cover the blood by the koi? It sounds like this is a special halacha for the koi. Afilu vaday nami. But isn't that a halacha even by a vaday chaya, which is for sure chayav and kisi adam? Beis Hillel said if you don't have prepared with the shovel in the ground and it's soft earth, or any of the other cases here, even by a vaday chaya, you can't do the kisi adam. So why is it saying it only by the kai? That was the reason why the Gemara thought that it is speaking about a case where there's prepared earth. So the Gemara explains, Loi mi baya kama. This Beitza here is saying that there's actually a chiddush regarding the kai. Loi mi baya vadai, needless to say when it comes to a vadai, in other words a chaya, with sure it's chayiv and kisi adam, the loi lishchait, you should not shecht it, because you know that you're not going to be able to do kisi adam. It's chayiv and kisi adam, and you don't have the earth prepared, so don't shecht it, you can't do the kisi adam. Avol suffix, when it comes to a kai, which is a suffix, it might be a behemoth, it might be potter from the kisi adam. Amen. Mishum simchas yomtiv lishchayit v'lo lechasye. So maybe for the purpose of simchas yomtiv, they're allowed to shecht it and not to cover the blood because it's only a suffix. It's not for sure mechuyev in kisi adam. So maybe by the kai, you could go ahead and shecht it and do the kisi and not do the kisi adam. That is. Kamash malon. That was the chiddush here. Even regarding a suffix, even though it's only a suffix of kisi adam, you can't shecht it and do the kisi adam. So the conclusion of the Gemara right now is that we're speaking about a case that, what are we talking about over here? That it does not have any offer. Does not have any offer. And there's a specific chiddush regarding the kai, that you should not go ahead and shecht it. But now the Gemara is going to prove from the end of the Beitza that it's not so. But what did it say in the end of the Beitza? Ve'im shachtai, that b'di'evet, once you did shecht already this kai, then ein mechasen es damai. You don't cover its blood. So what do you see from this? Miklal, from this it seems that the Reisha, or someone not guided this word, the Reisha, from here we see that we're talking about that he has the offer to cover it. So Rashi explains, how do you see this over here from the Sefer? Because it says, b'di'evet, you shouldn't cover. So what are we talking about? If he has no offer, that's not a chiddush over here. Again, that's the halacha by every chaya. The b'di'evet, even after you shechted it, Beis Hillel says you can't cover it with, you can't go and do a iser of malacha to go and cover the blood b'di'evet. Even b'di'evet, you have to have it prepared. So why would it say dafka by koi? So when it says there in the Sefer that b'di'evet, you shouldn't cover it, that has to be talking that even if you have prepared, even if you do have the offer prepared, nevertheless, by a koi, because it's a suffix behemoth, therefore you shouldn't cover it. So what do we see over here? So now the Gemara basically proved that this Beitza is speaking about a case where he has the earth prepared, and nevertheless, that you can't use it. So there's a distinction here between a koi and a regular chaya. By a koi, for some reason, even though you have the offer totally prepared, and there's no issue, there's no issue to use it, but nevertheless, by a koi, you should not use it to cover it. By a regular animal, a chaya that is, by a vadai, that it's chayiv in the midst of kisi adam, if you have the earth prepared, you should use it. So the continuation of the Gemara here will now discuss this subject. What's the difference? What would be the reason to make a distinction between the koi and the chaya? If you anyways have the earth prepared, why shouldn't you do the kisi adam for the koi? So the Gemara explains, Elo marab. So Rabbi explains as follows. Eife kira. Let's say he has the ashes of the kira that are prepared. That's one of the examples we had before. So muchan levadai, it's prepared and it's available to be used only for a vadai, a chaya. That's definitely chayav in kisi adam. But ve'ein muchan lesafik. It's not prepared for a koi, which is only a suffix. It's not prepared for that. That's the distinction that he makes. In other words, the person's mind, he's thinking that this offer should be used for a vadai, but he doesn't want it to be used for a suffix, and therefore it's not prepared to be used for a suffix. So the Gemara asks on this, l'suffix my time eloi. What's the difference? Why are you saying that for a suffix it's not prepared? The ka'avid guma, the issue is because when he's going to dig it, when he's going to take it out, he's going to create a hole. If that would be the issue, so vadai nami. So then again, what's the distinction between a koi, which is a suffix, and the vadai, the chaya? It's the same thing. Ka'avid guma. When he digs, he makes a hole. So again, the question is, what's the distinction? Ela kedrababe. So the answer is, making a hole is not an issue, like as we quoted before from Rab Abba, that it's makalkel, or that because he only needs the earth, so it's malacha she'ein tzricha legufa, as Taisva said. So therefore, that's not an issue. So hachanami kedrababe. So over here, the hole is not an issue, even regarding the koi. It shouldn't be an issue because it's makalkel or malacha she'ein tzricha legufa. So the question again remains, why are we making a distinction between a koi and a vadai? That for a koi you should not do the kisidam, even though you have the earth prepared, and for a vadai chaya you should. So the Gemara tries to say another svara. Ella, what are you going to say? Suffik, my time for a suffik, why shouldn't you do the kisidam? Dilma ovid kitisha. Because as we mentioned before, there's another issue that you might crumble the earth, which is like teichen. If so, vadei nami nigzeh mishum ketisha. For a vadei, we should also be geyser for ketisha. In other words, even if we're speaking about soft earth, but sometimes there are some clumps of earth inside, and you might end up doing ketisha, so maybe there was a gzeira. So if you're making that gzeira for the suffix, you should make that gzeira for the vadai. What's the difference? So the Gemara explains there is a difference. Vadai, kika ovid ketisha, when it comes to the vadai, if he ends up crumbling the earth, so you could say that it's not an issue, because Asi Esa, the Esa of Kisi Adam comes, the Dachias Lois Esa, and it pushes off the Lois Esa of not doing Malacha on Yantiv. So therefore for that, they weren't geyser. Even though, from Rashi you see this, and the Mefarshim explain, it's not exactly a case of Asi Esa v'Dacha Lois Esa, because theoretically you can wait until tomorrow to cover the blood. Kisi Adam doesn't have to be done right away. But nevertheless, because the mitzvah is to do it right away, if you can, that's the chavivus of the mitzvah, to do it right away, so for this they weren't geyser. Because there is an essa that usually is doicha lois essa. That's the difference between the chaya and the koi. By the koi, you don't even know if it's an essa. By a koi, it's a suffix. So the Gemara says, wait a minute, this subject of essa being doicha lois essa does not apply here. Why not? When do you say such a concept that the essa pushes off the lois essa? A person that has to do a bris milah and he has a nega right there in the makkah milah, and you're not allowed to cut it off. It's a lois essa, but then you have the mitzvah of milah. So that's one example. Inami sadin b'tzitzis, or you have a sheet that you want to put on tzitzis and it's shatnez, and you're being mekayim the mitzvah at the same time that there's a issa of shatnez, so then you're allowed. And why is that? The be'idne, the kamek lav, at the very same moment when you are uprooting the lav, kamaykim lasa, you're fulfilling an essay. It's at the same time. Then you say that the essa pushes off the leis essa. But hacha, here when it comes to crumbling the earth, in order to do the mitzvah of kisi adam, be'idne, the kamek lav, at the moment when he's crumbling the earth, and he's doing a lav of teichen, loimaykim asay, he hasn't fulfilled the essa yet. Only afterwards does he take it and put it on the dam. So it's not the same time. So the concept of essa deicha lois essa doesn't apply. So the Gemara says, no, that's not a question. Oh, like kashya, this is not a question. Why not? Because I can say the bahadi, the kotish, kamichsi, because he is doing it at the exact same time. He's crumbling it, and as he's crumbling it, the earth comes out of his hands and he covers the blood. So therefore, you could apply the svara of esa deicha lois esa, which is only for a vadei chaya, which is chayav in kisi adam, and not for a koi that's a suffix. And that's why by a koi they made a gzeira. You shouldn't do this. But the Gemara still asks, sof, but in the end, there's another question here. Is this a case of esa deicha lois esa? Yontiv is a esa v'lois esahu. Yontiv is both an esa and a lois esa. Ve'ein esa deicha es lois esa v'esa. And the esa of kisi adam does not push off yontiv, which is both a lois esa and an esa. So therefore, this can't be the difference between koi and a vadei chaya. That by a vadei chaya, we're not going to be geyser because of esa dechelois esa, and by a koi we will be geyser because either way, this is the yontiv is a esa and a lois esa. Elo amar Rava, so Rava gives a different answer to explain the difference between a koi and a chaya. And again, we're talking about a case where you have the earth prepared. And nevertheless, for a koi you should not do the kisi adam, and for a chaya you should. So what's the reason for the difference? So the pshat is as follows. Eife kira, the ashes of the oven, daitai levadai. His intention, in his mind, he has that he's going to use it for something that he definitely knows that he needs its use. So it's prepared for that. So for that it's not muktzeh. But for ein daitai lesafik, but for something that's only a suffix, if he might need it or not, that's not something that a person's mind is on it, that he's thinking, oh, I want this for this purpose. So in other words, this is a new concept of muktzeh here. Muktzeh doesn't always mean that if it's not muktzeh for anything. It depends what the person was thinking for. It might be not muktzeh for one thing, but still muktzeh for something else. If your intention was to use it for something that you know you'll need, for that it's not muktzeh. For the koi, since that's a suffix, and it's not something that you necessarily need it even for that it remains muktzeh. So therefore, even if it's prepared, you can't use it. Rava follows his opinion that he said elsewhere a similar thing. Rava said, Hichnis afar lachasas beitzaya. Person brought into his house earth in order to use it to cover tzaya. If there's any waste that he has to cover, he wants to have it there. Mutter lachasas beidam tzipper. So then you could use the same earth to cover the blood of a bird when you shech the bird. Because the tzaya is something that you might not 100% need it, so it's sort of a suffix. So if you had in mind specifically for something which is a suffix, for sure you can use it for the chicken that you shech, that you for sure had in mind that you were going to use it for that. What if it's the reverse? Dam tzipper. You brought in the earth in order to prepare it for the shechita of the bird. Then also lachasas beitzaya. Then you're not allowed to cover the tzaya with it because tzaya is considered to be only a suffix. You're not 100% sure. You might have a child that might be tzaya on the floor from the child, and you might have to use it, but you're not 100% sure. So here we see what Rava said. If you prepare something, in this case the afar, for the shechita, which is something you know for sure you'll need, it's not considered to be prepared for something else that you're not even sure you're going to need. Nahar Baloi argue, and they say, even if you brought it in to do the kisi adam for the tzipper, which is a vadai, muter lachasas beitzaya. You're also allowed to use it for something else which you're not 100% sure that you'll need it. It's not muktzeh for that either. Amri b'marave, in Eretz Yisrael they said, pligi barab yosi b'chome, v'rab zeire, and v'amri lo, others say the argument was Rava bereid, Rav Yosef bar Chome, and v'rab zeire, that they argued about this. Now Chadoma, one of them said, koi harei hu ketzaya. If you bring in earth to be used for a koi, which is a suffix, it's you're bringing it for something that's a suffix if you need it or not, because it might be a behemah, harei hu ketzaya. It has the same status as a tzaya, which is also a suffix, whether you're going to need it for the tzaya or not. So if you prepared it for one, you could use it for the other. Chadamar, another opinion is, koi eina ketzaya. Koi is not the same thing like tzaya. Why is koi not the same thing like tzaya? Because koi is taka a suffix. You don't know what this koi is. Is it a behemah or a chaya? But tzaya, Rashi says, is going to be considered to be a korev levadai. Because when you have children in the house, so then it's korev levadai that you're going to have tzaya that you're going to have to cover. So therefore, koi is not considered to be like a tzaya. If you brought it in for tzaya, you can't use it for the koi because tzaya is like a vadai. So the Gemara says to stayim, let's bring a raya, the Rava Huda Omar. Rava is the one that said, in this machlekes we had here Rava. And here you have the full name of who Rava was. Rava bereid Rav Yosef bar Chome. So let's bring a raya that Rava Huda Omar, koi areu ketzaya. That koi and tzaya are the same thing, they're both a suffix. The Omar Rava, because Rava said, hichnis afal achasas beit tzaya. You brought on the earth to cover tzaya, mutter lachasas beit dam tzipper. You're allowed to cover the dam tzipper. Why? Because the tzaya is a suffix. So if your intention was to use it even for something which is only a suffix, you for sure can use it for the dam tzipor that you know for sure you're going to need it for that. The reverse, tzipor, if you brought it in for a tzipor, then also lachasas by tzaya. Then you're not allowed to use it for the tzaya because that's only a suffix. So here we see that Rava considered the tzaya to be a suffix, not a vadai or korev levadai like the other opinion. So testayim, this is a raya that according to Rava, the tzaya is considered to be a suffix, and the kai is considered to be a suffix, and they have the same halacha. If you brought it in for one, you can use it for the other. Okay, this was all to explain the difference between the kisi adam for a kai and the kisi adam for a chaya. Even if you have earth prepared, you could only use it for the vadai, that's what your intention is for, but not for the kai because it's only a suffix. And for that it still remains muktzah. This was whose pshat over here? This was Rav's pshat. Now the Gemara brings another pshat to explain the difference. Rami bereded Rav Yeva Omar koi. You know why koi can't do the kisi adam? Hainu time aduloi mechasinon. You can't cover it even if you have the earth prepared. Gzeire mishum hataras chalbai. It's a gzeire that people might think that the chaylev of this koi is permitted. The isur of chaylev only applies regarding a behemah, not regarding a chaya, and the kisi adam is only regarding a chaya. So if he's gonna do the kisi adam, people are gonna think, oh, look, he's doing kisi adam. That means it's a chaya. If it's a chaya, that means that it's fat, it's mutter to eat. So therefore, even if you have the earth, you should not do kisi adam. If that's the reason, so then a kai, you shouldn't do kisi adam even during the weekday, not only Yom Tif. And for the Gemara, b'chayil, during the weekday, people are not going to make the mistake to think that the chaylev is mutter. Why? Amri, people will say that he's only covering the blood because he wants to clean out his courtyard, not because he's doing the mitzvah. Fragt the Gemara, but how about shachat ba'ashpe? How about on a weekday and he did the shchita in the garbage? So it's clear that he's not covering it to clean out his chatzar, it's in a garbage dump. So then, what are you going to say then? People are going to come to be matter the fats and say that it's a chaya. Or another question, the Gemara says, Bali malach, a person comes and he asks a question, do I have to do the kisei adam for this kai? And we paskin for him that he does. And if we're paskening for him that he does, won't that lead to a mistake that it's a chaya and therefore the chaylev people will think is mutter? So what is the difference between a yantif or a weekday? So the Gemara explains as follows: Ela b'choil, during the week, inami misapke, even if this kai is a suffix, if it's a behema or a chaya, so a person will say, Amri le Rabbanan zil trach v'kasi. Rabbanan are still telling me go and do the tircha do the kisi adam, even though it's a suffix. But even if it's a suffix, nevertheless the tircha should be done because it might be a mitzvah. And he's not going to make a mistake to think that it's for sure a chaya. No, during the week it makes sense why they're telling me to do this, because even for a suffix it should be done. Be Yom Tov, however, on Yom Tov, what a person will say is, if this kai is a suffix, if it's a behema or a chaya, will Rabbanan come and tell me to do something which is an extra tircha? In other words, even if it's not an issue of doing any malacha, because the earth is prepared, and there's no issue of muktzah, but nevertheless, there's an extra tircha in this. And on Yom Tov, we don't do an extra tircha. So the person will say, why are the chachamim allowing me to do this extra tircha? So doesn't that mean that it's for sure a chaya? So that's the difference. Dafka on Yom Tov, a person will come and make a mistake that if they're allowing him to do the kisi adam, that means that it's a for sure a chaya. So therefore, you never do kisi adam on Yom Tov, even if you have the earth prepared. Tani Rab Zeira learned to Nabraise, and he went a step further. Loi koil b'vad amru, not only regarding a koil did they say that you don't do the kisi adam and yontif because of the mistake we just said. You might think that it's going to be a chaya and the chaylev is allowed. Ela afilu shachad behema chaya v'oif v'nisarvu daman zebezeh. If you shechter an animal, a behema, and then a chaya and then a oif, all in the same place, and the bloods got mixed with one another, aser l'chaseisai b'yontif. You're not allowed to cover this on yontif. Why not? Because you have the bloods mixed together. And not necessarily a Yechayiv over here in Kisi Adam. So the point is, Rab Zeira shows that in this Braisa it says, anytime you're doing an extra tircha on Yontif, and you're not 100% sure that you're Chayiv in the Kisi Adam, you're not allowed to do it. So it's not only because of the mistake that you might come to think that you're going to be Mata Chaylev. So according to Rashi, Rab Zeira is actually arguing with the opinion that it said before. Anytime there's an extra tircha, and you're not sure you're Chayiv in the mitzvah, you're not allowed to do it. The Gemara explains, Omer Rav Yosi bar Yasino, Lo Ishanu, but this was only said, this was only said if you can't cover it with one shovel of earth. That's what you would need, the minimum you would need for the blood of the chaya. But if you could cover it with one shovel of earth, mutter. So then it's allowed. In other words, the point he's saying is you're not doing anything extra because of the blood of the behemoth that's there. you're covering one with one shovel. That's what you would have to do for the chaya anyway. So the fact that there's the blood of the behemoth mixed in doesn't matter. You're not doing anything more anyways. Right? The Alter Rebbe actually brings us a Shulchan Aruch and he explains, if it's a case that you have to do extra because there's more blood for the behemoth, so don't think that you're allowed to do just the first one and not any more. Once you have to do many, you're not allowed to do even one. You're not allowed to do anything because there's a gzeira you might do more. Only if there's just a little blood and you can cover it with one shovel, then you can do the kisi adam. But if you have to do more, it's not allowed. So the Gemara asks, Pshita, isn't this halacha pashat? If you're not doing anything extra, why should there be any issue? Mao the Taime, I would think Nigzar the Kira Achas Atushte the Kiris. Even in a case where you're not doing anything extra for the blood of the behemoth, but maybe there's a gzeira that if he's only shoveling once, he might come to shovel more times because there's more blood there. And he doesn't have to because it's for the blood of a behemoth. Kamash Malan, so that was the chiddush here that we don't make this gzeira. Amar Rabbe said, halacha shachat tzipay merev yomtiv. A person shechts a bird from before yomtiv, and then he didn't do the kisi dam yet. Ein mechasen oisai b'yomtiv. You can't come and do the kisi adam on yomtiv. You already shechted it, so you have your meat you need, and there's no issue that he's not going to have a simchas yomtiv. So now you're not allowed to go ahead and do the kisi adam on yomtiv. Gilgal isa, similar halacha. Gilgal isa merev yomtiv. If you needed a dough prepared from before yomtiv, and you did not take the challah from the dough that you're supposed to, mafresh mimenu chalasa be yomtiv. You're allowed to separate the challah on yomtiv itself, even though usually you're not allowed to separate trumis and maisris on Shabbos or on yomtiv because it looks like you're being misaken something, you're fixing it in order to be fit to eat. But over here, when you get to the isa that you prepare it before yomtiv, so you're allowed to be mafresh the challah. Rashi says, b'chlal, you're allowed to knead dough on yontif, you're allowed to bake challah on yontif. It's all allowed to be done on yontif in order to have fresh challah. So therefore you can separate the challah on yontif itself. Avod Shmuel Lama, the father of Shmuel said, Afila Gilgal Isa me'erev yontif, even if you already had the dough prepared from before yontif, ein mafresh mimeno chalasa b'yontif. You're not allowed to take off the challah on yontif itself. And Rashi here explains that according to Avur the Shmuel, only what was done on Yontif itself, that's allowed. But if you prepared it from before Yontif, you should have taken off the challah from before Yontif. Why did you wait until Yontif? So therefore in such a case he says it's not allowed. So now let's understand better this subject of taking off challah. So Leime, let us say, plige the Shmuel adavua, that Shmuel himself argued on his father. Shmuel says regarding when you separate challah, so he said chalas chutz la'aretz, the challah that you separate in chutz la'aretz, the chiyuv of challah is in Eretz Yisrael and it's also in chutz la'aretz, so that's with the chiyuv of challah chutz la'aretz is midrabanan. Oichel v'hoilech, you can first go ahead and eat your bread, eat from the dough, and v'achakach mafresh, and you can separate the challah later. So Rashi explains, what is the Gemara saying? From Shmuel you see that when you separate challah on yontif, you're not really being misaken anything. When you take off trumas and maisris, you can't eat before you take off trumas and maisris. So you're really being misaken. So that's why there's a gzeira not to do it on yontif. When it comes to challah, however, Shmuel said you can eat it and you can take it off later. So that you're not really being misaken because you can eat it anyways before. So according to Shmuel, there should be no issue to take off challah on yontif. So if so, it seems like he's arguing on his father that said that if you prepare the dough from before yontif, you shouldn't take off the challah on yontif. Amarave, so Rava answers, no. Miloi may the Shmuel not agree, she'im kara aleh shem, that when you call the name and you establish it as challah, sha'asura lezarim, that challah becomes asa for a zar, that now it's only for a kayin to eat and no one else is allowed to eat it, which means that even according to Shmuel, it is similar to Trumas and Maisris, that the gzeira of Chacham applies for challah as well, because it's just like Trumas and Maisris that you give it its name and it belongs to the kayin. And Taisu says that it's also considered to be misaken. You are being misaken, even though you could have eaten it before, but once you designate it, you will misaken it, and it now belongs to the kayin. So therefore Shmuel will agree to his father that if you prepare the dough from before Yontif, you should not separate the challah on Yontif itself.